We are dealing with truth. We're thinking about and talking about, have been discussing truth as as sort of on the one hand a concept, and on the other hand more than just a concept, something we practice, something we live out. And so today we're going to start talking about being people of truth. And I want to share my screen with you just for a minute, just largely because I think this is cool. I don't know if you saw the news of the discovery of new fragments of scripture in the Dead Sea area. And one of the fragments is a Greek translation of Zechariah, and part of the text that's preserved in this fragment is one that I thought was pretty appropriate to our discussion tonight. These are the things you are to do: speak the truth to one another, render true and perfect justice in your gates. Zechariah 8:16 is what that is. What I like about this, by the way, is you can see right here some script that looks a little different. Do you see that? Can you see my arrow? I assume you can. That script that looks a little different, that's Hebrew. Why do you think 4 Hebrew characters would be stuck in the middle of an otherwise Greek text?
There must not be a Greek word for it.
There is not precisely a Greek word for it. You're correct about that. What word do you think it might be? It is, those are the Hebrew characters for the name of God, Yahweh. And so I just think that's kind of interesting and kind of cool. This fragment that is written almost entirely in Greek, except for that, and there's another, you can see another example of it just a couple of lines above. So anyway, I just think that was kind of cool and thought I would show it to you. And it kind of fits with our topic. It fits very much with our topic: speaking the truth and practicing the truth. That's what Zechariah talks about, right? These are the things you're to do: speak the truth to one another, that's important, and also render true and perfect justice in your gates. That's practical stuff. That's practicing the truth. So you speak it and you practice it. You're honest, you don't lie, you don't deceive, but you also treat one another in accordance with the truth. So that's kind of going to set the tone a little bit for what we're going to talk about tonight. Turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Zechariah chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. Zechariah 7, 9 and 10. Would somebody read that for us? Zechariah 7, 9 and 10.
This is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. You said 9, right?
Yes, 9 and 10.
It's me. 9 and 10.
9
Okay.
and 10, yeah.
No, I thought, Never mind. Okay. This is what the Lord of Heaven's army says: judge fairly and show mercy and kindness to one another. Do not oppress widows, orphans, foreigners, and the poor, and do not scheme against each other.
The word true here is something we should talk about a little bit. How do we use the word true in English? Just think of some of the usages of true, how we might use that word. Some of you English scholars, how do we use the word true?
When somebody expresses an opinion or says something, we might respond with, yes, that's true. And then oftentimes there's a but after it.
So that's right. Sometimes, right. Sometimes it's, that's true, but so is this, we're probably going to say, right? That's true, but there's this other truth that maybe you're not considering. But the idea of the truth is facts, right? We've sort of talked about that what is true is factual. It's not fake. It's not an opinion that is that's based on faulty information. To the best of our knowledge, what you just said is true. Okay. What's another usage of the word true?
It's real.
Real. Okay.
Yeah, it's the real deal.
Okay.
I've heard people say, yeah.
Genuine. It's right.
Genuine, authentic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Right. Very good.
You true up something and make it align or level.
That's a word you don't hear much anymore. Usage you don't hear as much anymore. But to make something level or aligned up, it's trued up. Sometimes is what somebody might say. You true it up, meaning it sort of fits this this criteria. It's as it should be. What's another usage? I'm thinking of one you might hear when somebody's a good shot. What might they say if somebody's a good shot? What might they say about that person?
Your aim is true.
Aim is true, right?
Mm.
She's lined up, right? She's right on the target. She's burned in, and her aim is true. Can you think of any others? I'm a Springsteen fan. He sings a song called "Be True," which, what does that mean? When somebody is, if you tell somebody to be true, or you hope somebody will be true, what does that mean?
They're loyal and faithful. A true friend would be someone who's there in all circumstances.
Right, exactly. That's true.
And I think about that person that has nothing to hide. What you see is what you get. They're true.
Right.
They're real.
Right.
Mhm.
Right, very good. Genuine again. There's no artifice. There's no facade. They're not pretending to be something they're not. Well, so in the Old Testament, in Zechariah, the word true kind of has a lot of those meanings. It certainly has to do with factualness, but reliability, sureness, faithfulness, all of those things are part of that word true in the Old Testament. Hebrew, it's emet, if you're interested. But it's a word that kind of is used the way we use the word true in English to mean a lot of different things, all sort of revolving around the idea that there is a standard, right? There is something to which we're trying to be congruent, something with which we're trying to be congruent, right? We're trying to fit this particular standard, whatever that might be, and however we might be measuring it. So you have the idea that relationally being true goes beyond telling the truth. It involves telling the truth, but it goes beyond telling the truth. And that's something we talked about some last week as well, that truth has a relational aspect to it that goes beyond just, I'm not going to lie to you. It's faithfulness, it's reliability, it's sureness. We'll talk later about another word that you might be familiar with that is sort of synonymous with it in the Old Testament. So last week we sort of ended with somebody asking the question, is there ever a good reason to not tell the full truth to somebody? And I promised we'd talk about that this week. So I think this is a good place to sort of begin with that question. Is there ever a time when maybe there's a good reason not to tell the truth to somebody? What do you think?
Well, I think sometimes you want to break the truth gently to somebody. Let's say there's a death.
Okay.
Your relative got killed or something, and you just want to go up and tell somebody that bluntly. They might have a heart attack or something. So you want to
So-
break it to them gently, break it down a little bit, but the truth's got to come out, but you got to get it out eventually.
So we agree probably that there certainly we should be thoughtful at times about the way we tell the truth. That at least is something we probably agree with. But what
Some
about?
have, some have suggested if you've got Anne Frank in your house and the Gestapo is at the door.
Okay, all right. You're hiding a Jewish person from the Gestapo in World War II. Now that's not going to happen probably to us, but something, if something like that occurred, something similar to that, what's the mandate? What's required morally, right? To protect this person from this unjust treatment or to tell the truth.
We think
The
of Moses and
tension is
his
placed right there, right?
Well, that was what Rahab did.
wife. Mhm.
Yeah, good point. Good point. You have Rahab hiding the spies, right? And God says, well, you shouldn't have lied. No, God doesn't say that. God blesses her for hiding the spies from the Canaanites. Now, I don't know to what degree she just hid them. I don't know to what degree she had to, but she was deceiving them, right? Other thoughts?
Oh, she told the people that they went that way. and-
Oh, that's right. That's right. You're absolutely right. She did absolutely say that. I was thinking she just hid them, but you're right. There is that part of it where they say, where they go, and she says they went that way, and runs them off course.
I doubt we'll ever be hiding the Lord's spies.
Right.
Hopefully not.
Other thoughts?
I think if you can avoid hurting someone unnecessarily, if you can either, I don't really advocate if they ask you point blank and you lie to them, but there might be times, I'm thinking of a child, perhaps they ask a question that they're not ready to have the answer to at their age. If there is a way that you could get around that until there is a more appropriate time. I'm just thinking of trying not to hurt people with the brutal truth,
Okay.
I guess is what I'm saying.
And that's, I think, an important part of this. If there is a time, I think it's in order to be true in other ways to those people, right? And if there's a good reason, then it would require the motive of genuinely, I'm looking out for the interest of this other person. The problem I have with that is that it's so easy to convince ourselves that we're not telling the truth for the benefit of this other person when it's really for our benefit more than anything else.
Well, sometimes, but not necessarily.
No, that's not necessarily, that's right. But sometimes. I'm thinking of another example that came to my mind was somebody who has dementia asking about a parent, who has passed away years ago, but in this person's mind, that parent is still alive. And if you tell that person the truth, that in a day or 2 days or a week, they're going to ask again, and they're going to mourn again, and they're going to mourn again. And every time they hear the news, they're going to mourn again.
Exactly.
Perhaps in that setting, isn't it maybe, and it's something you'd have to, as the family of that person, something you'd have to kind of figure out on your own, I suppose. But might there not be a good reason in that situation to just let that person live thinking that parent is alive?
Right. Something you have to work out with your Lord sometimes.
But again, it is so easy at times for us to convince ourselves. So I think those times are going to be few and far between. But there may be some situations in which being true to the person in the larger sense of relationally and caring for them and watching out for them might at least allow that we may consider not telling the whole truth. But it's one of those slippery slope things, right? That we have to be aware of. That it's easy to take refuge in that at times instead of dealing with hard truths that need to be dealt with. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think the same problem. This is why this is so tricky. I think the same thing can apply to the scenario we talked about with Rahab, or just protecting an oppressed or persecuted group of people. Because I think no one would doubt what the right thing to do in the Holocaust situation we discussed is. But the problem with that is any issue that's important to us can, in our minds, become just as important as hiding a Jewish family in your basement, and allows us to justify lying for our pet causes because it's that important. So I think it's good to acknowledge that there's a whole lot of complexity here, and maybe not one solid answer that works in every single situation.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When Peter denied knowing Jesus, wasn't that a lie?
Yeah.
That was a lie.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he paid dearly for it too.
Mhm.
He was forgiven. but
I'm
he-
sorry, I didn't hear you, Dan.
It shook him to the core.
Yeah, I mean, and it's illustrative of the fact that lying to get out of something or to protect ourselves or our own interests is an easy thing to do, and awfully tempting at times. And
Yeah, I think too, what stands out to me about protecting others and sometimes even yourself would be motive. And we don't always look at our own motives, but I think the faith is in God looking at my heart and dealing with my motive. And if I'm off a little bit, that he would nudge me or correct me or discipline me. But I think it's motive, especially when we talk about someone who is oppressed, or if we're talking about an injustice, or there's grace that's needed, or revealing something from children because developmentally they are not ready to hear it. I think motive has a lot to do with truth telling under that umbrella. And when we do it to serve ourselves, I think if motive is right, we will be convicted. And maybe have to go back and say, sorry, and I didn't tell you the truth. Or I guess, like you guys have been saying, it's a slippery slope. It's sitting here. Every time I go, you can tell the truth here, no. And it's really hard. My mom died with Alzheimer's, and Jenny's having the same issue with her mother, constantly asking about her. My mom asked about her dad all the time. Jenny's mom is asking about her mother. And if it's hard, very hard if they tell her she's dead. I mean, wailing, and the caretaker. And so it's looking at the caretaker in that situation. Will they get sleep that night to be able to do what's necessary the next day in caring for a parent? So it's motive of hard, but not only a motive because I care for someone, but a motive in that what my role will be as the caretaker if I say yes. So it's case by case, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, I think it's a fair question because we all know there are times when, when the joke is, do these pants make me look fat or whatever? that's the sort of the joke one, right? But we all know there are these times where that just, just broadsiding somebody with the truth is not always wise. I think what Dan said first was an important thing to think about as well. Sometimes telling the truth should be done in a very particular way, in a very gentle way, in a very as gently as possible. Those are all things we have to think about. But yeah, so I appreciate your questions and your comments, because I think it's I think as Christians, and as we start talking about this idea of being true, and particularly to particular people in our world, it's a bigger, and I guess my point is, it's a bigger and much more multidimensional thing than just telling the truth, though that's part of it, and a huge part of it. So in this text we have in Zechariah 7:9-10, what does truth look like? What are some of the words that are used here to talk about and expand on the idea of truth?
To judge fairly,
He
to show mercy and kindness.
Okay.
He says, though, administer true justice. Now, again, and then he says, show mercy and compassion. So I'm thinking of a situation like, someone is on trial for murder, and the evidence is very clear. The person is guilty, and so and in a place where they have the death penalty as a possibility, this is a case that cries out for the death penalty in most people's eyes. But then in the next part of the sentence, it says, show mercy and compassion. So again, what is true justice in that case? Is the person, if you want justice for the victim, this person is guilty and deserves the death penalty. But then how do we show mercy and compassion by administering that penalty? It's a real paradox here, I think.
So I think one of the struggles we have in reading the Old Testament, especially the prophets, is that word justice. Because we are thinking always, when we hear that word justice, we're thinking a court proceeding. We're thinking a judge banging a gavel. That is a form of justice. It ought to be. Hopefully it's a form of justice. Often, perhaps it's not, but it should be a form of justice. Justice, though, is a bigger thing than that, especially in the Old Testament. The word really is just judgment. It's the picture. Notice it's in the gate, right? What does that mean? That it's happening in the gate. Oh, that's in the first one we looked at in Zechariah 8:16. Justice in your gates. What's that about the gates? What does that mean?
Isn't that where the men of the town learn it? They would sit there, and I don't know, would people then come and bring cases to them and then ask them for what their judgment was on it?
Yeah, people would come in and say, hey, I'm having this dispute with my neighbor. Help us solve it. Well, I mean, if you've got wise people sitting at the gates to do that, it's more like advice than it is like binding judgment, more like perhaps mediation or arbitration is what's going on. So, the person's coming in. So if you've got people there who are wise, who can make good judgments and can be trusted, then it's going to work out fine. If you got somebody there who you know is going to favor the wealthy guy over the not wealthy guy, or is going to favor the landowner over the widow, or over the orphan, or over the foreigner, well, the system's not going to work, right? So what's being envisioned there is not so much the blam the gavel in a court case. It's more, are you dealing fairly with one another? It'd be easy. It's easy to, Jesus talks about the Pharisees taking widows' homes, right? Devouring widows' houses. Well, that's what's happening. That's what the prophet was saying shouldn't happen. They're taking advantage of somebody who has no one to speak for them and has no one to fight for them. It's easy, it's low-hanging fruit, right? They're just able to just take it with no one to resist. So that's the justice that we're talking about here. It's this fair dealing with one another. And it's not just in a courtroom. It's in the gates of the city. It's in your dealings with each other. It's in not bringing a case to the gates of the city if you know it's not fair, if you know it's oppressive. So that's what the prophet is saying God wants. He wants his people to behave in a way that is fair to one another. They're true to one another. And so that's a piece of it. So I don't know if that responds to your question, Diana.
Oh, yes.
But you see then how mercy and compassion connect back to that more readily than the courtroom scenario you're envisioning.
I guess I'm thinking more in a criminal sense.
Right.
And this is more of a civil thing between people where, you take somebody to a civil court, it's a whole different thing.
I mean, in our culture, I can think though, if we must have a death penalty, I can certainly think of more compassionate, merciful ways to go about it than we currently do, right? To have these long, my cousin Tommy, who ministers to death row inmates, befriends death row inmates, talks about, I can't explain why a state locks somebody away in a concrete cell for 25 years in order to kill them.
Right.
I can't quite envision that. I can't quite fathom that. He's not necessarily saying there shouldn't be a death penalty. He's just sort of talking about the fact that these are human beings. They did something terrible, but they're human beings, and there is some room for compassion there, even as we carry out that sentence that perhaps we must. So I hope you see how compassion and mercy, it's a really good question, because I think the way we often think of justice, it's supposed to be impartial, right? Compassion and mercy almost undermine it in the way we think about justice. If I'm too compassionate, I'm not going to do what justice demands. But that's not really the way justice is envisioned in the Old Testament and the way the prophets talk about it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Other comments or other thoughts?
I was thinking that true justice is mercy and compassion. It encompasses that if I'm gonna take time and give advice or care for the oppressed and show this true justice and fairness and equitableness, it takes me having a heart of mercy and compassion, that I can see others through a lens that equal, we're equals. And that allows me to be merciful and not to be oppressive or not to be heavy-handed.
Good.
So I sometimes think of true justice is that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly the point the prophet's making here. That those things, he kind of is layering words here. You notice the Old Testament does that. It sort of layers words that are almost synonymous to sort of give you a sense of this is what we're talking about here. So true justice and mercy and compassion. The word mercy there is a word you might have heard before. Hesed. Anybody ever heard the word hesed before in discussions of when we talked about Ruth? Seems like 100 years ago now. Hesed was a big part of that. Hesed is that kind of loyal covenant love that is faithful, that's true, right? It's that I'm going to do the best thing for you. I'm going to do what you need done. I'm going to care for you and look out for you. And I'm going to do that because we have a relationship. We have a covenant. We're connected. God is often spoken of in the Old Testament as showing Hesed to his people. And so it fits that as if we're going to be true to each other, it's going to require that loyal kind of covenant love. The word compassion there actually comes from the Hebrew word, I didn't know this, but it comes from the Hebrew word for womb. So it's sort of a very vivid picture of sort of the idea of motherly compassion, right? Motherly care, the care of a mother for the child that she bore. And it certainly doesn't eliminate the idea that dads can have that kind of compassion too, or that men can have that same compassion as women. It's just a way of sort of talking about this, what we want here, this sense of care and responsibility for another person and concern for their well-being. And that's what's asked of us in these verses. So again, he's sort of layering words. True justice, mercy, compassion. These are all adjectives or nouns that describe how we are to be true to one another, what truth looks like in our relationships with each other. I think sometimes we, in our tendency to equate truth with fact, we sort of almost remove the idea of mercy and compassion completely from the equation. And in the Old Testament, truth demands it. In the New Testament as well, truth demands those things. It requires mercy, compassion, in addition to the facts that we're talking about. So what doesn't truth look like? He also has some examples of what you shouldn't do if we're going to be true to each other. What do those examples look like?
Oppressing people who are not able to fight back.
You can almost in the Old Testament say widow / orphan / foreigner / poor. It's almost one term, right? It's such a repetitive thing that it kind of can be taken as, like you said, Diana, a concern for the part of people who have no one else to take their part. In our world, widows can still be vulnerable, but are not as vulnerable as they were in the Old Testament world for the most part. Foreigners, obviously, in our world, still often vulnerable, often people who need particular care. Think about all the organizations that help people who have immigrated to our country try to find their place and build a life, and it requires a lot to make that move, and so so all of these things are all of these words kind of sum up that category of people who need somebody to help them, who need a little extra and need somebody to take their part. So you don't oppress them. And we've talked a little bit about what that oppression looks like, but I mean, you can, we see it in our world, right? You see what it looks like to take advantage of someone. And there are people who do it all the time. I said widows aren't as vulnerable, and they're not, but I'm thinking of all the scams that seem to be run specifically aimed at older people, right? Who don't don't quite know how to figure out this and see through it, and don't maybe understand how technology works as well, and so they're quick to fall prey to some of these things. People who financially take advantage of the elderly or whoever. Yeah, Josh.
I think that we were talking about does justice contradict compassion and mercy sometimes? I think what we were just talking about is exactly why sometimes the best way or the only way to show compassion to one group of people is for another group of people to face consequences.
Right.
Just to use there are a lot of examples you could use, but to use the example of the phone scammer you talked about. So someone uses deceit to steal, hundreds of thousands of dollars from a vulnerable person and empty their life savings. If I can't repay that myself, and I'm in a position of authority, I have a choice other than to try to track down that scammer and say, you're paying this person back or you're going to prison.
Right.
And as for showing compassion to the person responsible, I mean, I think they've received plenty of compassion throughout their life if they're in a position where they can be responsible for something like that. And once restitution is made, forgiveness can take place. I just think that we can get squeamish when it comes to consequences sometimes. And we start to wonder when mercy needs to get involved. And what we should be thinking about is, you hear a lot about this. We've had horrible shootings and hate crimes recently. And I'm tired of seeing more compassion for the perpetrator than for the victims.
Yeah.
And I think the prophets are key right now, and how much emphasis they placed on justice for the oppressed above all else.
Yeah, I don't think Zechariah would say that somebody who scams a widow or takes the house of a widow deserves much compassion, right? I mean, you can certainly bring consequences and punishment to bear in a way that continues to hold out the possibility of reform and transformation. And so there's compassion in that, but I mean, I don't think there's any chance that Zechariah or the other prophets would think that somebody in that situation was deserving of a free pass. That's what compassion should look like.
But then we would have to eliminate accountability, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so we know that wrongdoings, there should be accountability. And again, that's why justice is mercy and grace. But yeah, I'm with Josh on this. I'm kind of tired of hearing compassion in the wrong way towards those that do wrong.
Right.
Like the guy was tired, and that's why he, shot all the Asian.
Yeah,
people.
that statement. I didn't catch all of it. Didn't somebody say he had a bad day?
That's what it was. He had a bad day, he had a.
Come on.
The cop said it. That's who said it.
Yeah.
It was the chief of police.
He got in trouble.
I mean, a lot of people have bad days. Yeah. It's just hard to fathom. Yeah, and so I don't think we should take this as compassion sort of works against justice. It's all associated. It's all connected. And again, justice isn't just punishment of the guilty. Justice is, let's have a society where these things don't happen, or they don't happen as much. And when they happen, that they're, unanimously decried as wrong and evil and that need to be stopped. That's justice. That's what justice looks like.
I don't really think that when it says administer true justice, it's talking about justice for the perpetrator. I think that in most instances, the widow, the fatherless, the foreigner, and the poor were the ones that weren't getting justice.
Exactly.
So
That's right.
I think when it says administer true justice, it's wanting us to put ourselves in their shoes and show mercy and compassion and give them justice, not justice to the person who did.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Read the Beatitudes through the lenses of the prophets. It's really interesting. This won't cost you anything extra. It's really interesting. There's Jesus. One of the Beatitudes is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And we kind of think, well, Jesus is saying, blessed are those who want God to make them righteous. He will. And who would disagree with that, right? I think Jesus has the prophets in mind. Blessed are those who have been cheated and ripped off and oppressed, and they're hungering and thirsting for somebody to take their part, because God takes their part. God cares for them. That's, I think, what Jesus is getting at in that statement. And I think that's very of a piece with the prophets and their care and concern for justice and for truth, and for the way we build a society, a world based on truth, being true to one another and true to God and true to all of that. Peter, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth. So obey the truth. What's the truth there, by the way? You've purified yourselves by obeying the truth. What is the truth he's referring to?
Truth of the gospel?
The gospel. It's the gospel, clearly. You've obeyed the gospel. You've obeyed this, which interesting, obeying the gospel is interesting. It's a story, it's a narrative, it's good news. How do you obey it? Well, you obey it by doing what Jesus said, right? and so you've purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other. So it's you obey the gospel so that you have sincere love for each other. Oh, good. Well, we're done, right? We obeyed the gospel. Now we have sincere love for each other. That's all it takes, right? Except Peter goes on to say, love one another deeply from the heart. So we obey the gospel. We can love each other now. We have this love for each other that's available to us. Now we got to go do it. That's very prophet-like, very prophetic.
Love is an action.
Yeah. Love in the things we do. What's that?
Love is an action, not emotion.
Yeah, we know how to love through the gospel. We have that power, we have that ability, and now we go do it. We love one another deeply from the heart. I think Zechariah would say, amen, brother Peter, you're absolutely right. and affirm that. Well, we don't have a lot of time. I maybe we'll just have you consider these little on your handout, these little situations. And these were the first four or five I came up with. Being true to each other. How are you going to do it when a brother or sister in Christ confides in you that they're planning to divorce their husband or wife? How are you going to be true to that brother or sister in Christ, and also that spouse? How are you going to be true to another person when you're in a political disagreement and the situation is just escalating? How are you going to be true to that person? How are you going to be true to that person who has asked you for financial help many times and they've come back to you again? How are you going to be true? How are you going to be true when a coworker tells you about an incident of racism that they've experienced at work? What does being true demand of you in that situation? How about when your child's friend expresses confusion over their gender identity? What is being true to the friend, to your child? What does that demand in that situation? Anyway, just some things to think about. If you have comments or thoughts, please share them, or just take those with you and consider them a little bit, and consider situations like them that perhaps they they awaken in you, because truth is something that is relational, that works itself out in true justice and compassion and mercy and not taking advantage. And I sort of skipped over not plotting evil against one another. Oh, that's a big one, right? That's that in our world. That's something that we should hear. If you're true to one another, you're not going to plot evil against each other. You're not off in the corner planning how to cut the legs out from under somebody. So anyway, I'll throw it open. Any thoughts or comments or questions?
I think we should also think about compassion. I'm sorry, Alan, about the situation, the current situation at the border in Texas. These, young kids that are being, I don't know if they're just, I don't know if they're being sent by their parents or if they're just deciding I'm going to head for what is the compassionate way and the right way to handle that? It just seems, I don't know, hopeless. I think that, what a lot of people say is, well, you show compassion, you let these many in, and then that's just going to bring more because they're going to, and I look at that situation and I can't even imagine how that is going to be resolved. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this too, Diana, because I think when things are very hard, we do nothing. And when we do nothing, and that's what has happened over the years, and when we do nothing, that's where the lack of compassion, the lack of holding to the truth, misinformation develops. Our hearts become stones, and we treat kids or anyone the way we're treating them because we decide we can't do nothing because we're so frozen by what's right, what's fair. We're stuck to that. And when things are difficult, and I love these questions that I was thinking about when Patrick, these questions kind of point to what we're talking about here with the kids at the border. They're so hard. It's hard to figure this out unless you're going through it. And even when you're going through it, you freeze, you do nothing because how do I take a stand? How do I help someone when their kid is talking about being maybe a transgender or gender identity, and my kid brings it home? I would do nothing. You're like, how do you have that conversation with your child? And so I think that's what happens with the whole border thing. This thing has gotten out of hand that we forgot to be compassionate. We've forgotten to care. And I think when we can start doing that and make it relational, America's not our home anyway, right? It belongs to God then, and we've got enough land for everybody. And I know that sounds very trite and simple because I have arguments all the time with people talking about their taxes and why that shouldn't happen that way. But I'm going, but this is not your land. It's by the grace of God, for the grace of God, we are here. But it's amazing. I think that's how we stop being compassionate when it's too hard to make a decision for what's true, at least for me.
I think that's a really great point.
I said a lot of it'd be like, I can't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's a really great point. I think you're absolutely right. And Diana, you're talking about the border, and what I was thinking about was a friend of mine, Bobby Lawson, who used to be the minister at the Park Forest Church down in Matson. Bobby, for years, would get up at the crack of dawn every Friday, before dawn, every Friday, and go to an ICE holding facility somewhere up here and pray with people, with families and people who had been detained who were being sent back to their countries. Every Friday without fail, he got up, he drove out there, and he would just take, and he's like, I don't know what good it does. I'm not sure. But it was his way of saying, look, this is an untenable situation. It's from a compassion standpoint. And so we're going to do something, right? And that led actually to him actually going down making a couple of trips down to Texas to help some organizations who were serving, and I assume are still there, who were some churches and some other organizations who were actually serving meals to refugees at the border, trying to get across, trying to find a way to come across. And dealing, he was telling stories about dealing with cartel people and just all the stuff that involved. And I was thinking of that when you were mentioning that, Diana. That, I don't know how to solve the big problem, but we know what compassion and mercy look like, right? To the degree that we can do it, to the degree that we can make those things happen. We know what that looks like. And so, I think that's what we do. We go about being compassionate and merciful in the places we can, and in so doing, demonstrating the kingdom of God, living out the gospel.
I would just like to say the ultimate, and I wish I had love deep enough to do it, is go down there and bring one of those children home with me.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
that's love.
That's right. That's
of course, you'd go through 13 lawyers and we'd spend all of our life savings trying to get one of them. But those children were sent here for a reason. It's to protect them. They were in bad situations there. To me, the true love would be to go down there and get one.
One of the things I think we need to is to understand the situation, to understand, theoretically, these kids have family members. Maybe compassion is some people say, you know what, I'm going to take it on myself to help some of these kids find those family members. And I mean, I know that's what government officials are trying to do, and I'm sure many of them work very hard trying to do it, and are just driving themselves crazy trying to do it. But maybe some of it is you help, and you do what you can. So I mean, that sounds like a cop-out answer, because I don't know the answer to the big problem. I guess I take a little comfort in the fact that nobody else seems to know the answer either to the big problem. But we know what that looks like. As Christians, we know what compassion and mercy and love look like. And so, so you're not going to go wrong there, right? You're not going to go wrong with being true and living out the truth in the lives of the people around you, whatever the big problem is. Well, I got 8:30. Thanks for your thoughts and your discussions. We'll pick up here next week. Maybe if you have some thoughts on any of these specific categories next week, we can talk about that. Or if not, we will just go on into we'll continue our conversation. So thank you for your thoughts and your words and your presence. It's good to see everybody. I appreciate all of you.
Good night.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for the
Good
list.
night.
Everybody.
Alan, I guess we got to stay around a minute. Alan, I guess we need to stay around.
Are we?
Yeah, I think we're supposed to meet with Renee and Carlos.
Goodbye.
Good night.
I didn't know if they accepted.
I think so. I mean, let me see if I got an email or something from them, but I believe so. I'm not seeing anything from them. Carlos said he would join via Zoom. He thought so. Maybe give him just a minute and see if he or Renee.
Yeah,
Let me just shoot him.
I never heard from Renee, and
Let me shoot him a quick text and see
yeah,
if oh, Carlos wants the invitation for the meeting.